Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today we're going to take a look at the Centurion Nova Prime. The character of Nova is one of my favorite characters. I fell in love with the character when I was about 10 years old, and when I first saw his comic, holy crap, did I enjoy it. It was first drawn by John Buscema, inked by Joe Sinnott, and holy crap, did they do a good job. After a few issues, sadly, John Buscema was replaced by his brother Sal, which was fine for me. I always kind of preferred Sal for reasons. And Joe Sinnott was replaced by Tom Palmer. Uh, there was a few guest inkers here and there, and maybe a few guest pencilers. It's been a while since I read that series, but basically the first 12 issues were all kinds of awesome. And the second 12 issues, like the series lasted about 24 issues. The second batch of 12 issues, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't quite as good as the first half of the series. It was drawn by Carmine Infantino. It was inked by Tom Palmer for quite a bit, but towards the end there was a handful of guest inkers and even guest pencilers. Although one of those guest pencilers that's in one issue was John Buscema, so it's kind of hard to complain about that. But sadly, the series ended on a cliffhanger. But luckily, the cliffhanger was resolved within the pages of the Fantastic Four, and it was a great run on the Fantastic Four at the time. Although the Fantastic Four were in transition between the era when Keith Pollard was actually drawing the series and the era when John Byrne first drew the series, his first run on the Fantastic Four. Not the run where he penciled and wrote, actually pencil inked and wrote, but before that he was just a penciler on his first run, and it was masterfully inked by Joe Sinnott, and I think the writer was Marv Wolfman, who was the same writer as the Nova series, which is why the Nova series was pretty much concluded within the pages of the Fantastic Four, although not quite. Later on, then there was the series Rom the Space Knight, another series that I really enjoyed. And it was a great series by penciled by Sal Buscema. Actually, I think Sal penciled and inked himself at first. It was written by Bill Mantlo, and later on, Sal was inked by Joe Sinnott. And around issue 24, 25 of ROM, I forget, that's where we got the final story with Richard Rider, aka the Centurion Nova Prime. And Richard Rider pretty much gave up his power and decided to go back to Earth. And that was the last we saw of that character until much later when he was brought back within. Actually, there was a What If issue after that, and then later on he was brought back within the pages of the New Warriors. And I was really happy to see him back. I was always a big fan of the character. Although in the New Warriors he had a whole bunch of costumes, we're not going to look at those costumes. Basically, they were similar to the costume we're seeing right now, but he had like sometimes a weird red. They changed the blue for red, and sometimes he had these weird red T-shirts or these weird red shirts that weren't really nice looking. So this is about as close to the original look to the Centurion Nova Prime as I was able to get. Basically, once we had the Green Knight helmet, the Green Lantern helmet, I knew that basically this is the helmet that Nova was wearing was some sort of bucket almost. He had the nickname Buckethead, and when I saw this Buckethead helmet, I knew that I had to use it to recreate Nova. Sadly, I would need some sort of starburst to the front of the face or the mask. But this is sadly about within the limitation of this universe online. This is about as close to the original Nova I was able to get. But thanks to basically the helmet is the Green Knight helmet. The emblem is the Shade helmet, the Shade emblem. It's the emblem from Shade, the Changing Man. The belt is like the fourth world belt. The pants are the bloodbath pants, which allows us to have the nice yellow stripes on the side. The chest is the streak slimline chest, and the boots are the tall classic boots. And the aura is the Ember Mist aura. I thought it kind of worked with the character. So obviously we will never have an official Nova helmet in this universe online, seeing how Nova is a Marvel character. But the Green Knight helmet works well enough to recreate more or less the look of the Nova character. It helps to recreate the bucket head that the character was wearing, If only we could have some way to have like a starburst to the front of the helmet. It would be nice, but I guess we make do with what we can with the styles that we have. But who knows? Maybe someday in the future they'll come up with some sort of helmet which will be perfect for the Centurion Nova Prime. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that to happen. Later on, the Nova powers were transferred to a character called Garthan Sal. Basically, the Nova core comes from the planet Xandar. At some point, Xandar was sort of kind of destroyed, but there were still like three cities of Xandar which were still connected together. Was it three cities or four cities? I forget. Anyway, there were a couple of cities that were still connected together, and they had these domes around the cities, pretty much preserving those cities, and they were sadly floating in space since they no longer had a planet. But then later on, the evil Nebula decided to destroy what was left of Xandar, and somehow our friend Garthan Sal was pretty much the last survivor. Somehow he ended up with the Nova Force. He came back to Earth somehow and fought the Avengers, and he had pretty much a costume similar to the first costume I showed. Although the blue was, instead of being blue, was pretty much purple, and the colors of the helmet was a bit different. But basically, he came back to Earth as Supernova, and he wanted to destroy the world or something like that. But anyway, he was pretty much stopped by the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. And for some reason at the time, like Reed Richards and Sue Storm were members of the Avengers somehow, which that lasted like 3 issues, 4 issues. So basically, the combined forces of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four were able to pretty much repel our friend Supernova at the time. But then during the pages of the New Warriors, for some reason, Garth Sal came back, and for some reason, it was given the powers of the Centurion Nova Prime. So Rich Rider for a while lost his powers, and those powers were given to Garth Sal, and he had a look kind of sort of like what you're seeing right now. It's not exactly it, but it's as close as I was able to get. It's pretty close actually. So to reproduce that style, basically, I have the shaman gloves, the green arrow shoulders. The chest piece is the chevron chest piece. The belt is the druid belt, I think. The boots are the shepherd of Adara boots, and the head is the brave star head piece. So for the face, I pretty much colored the face blue, and I'm using the glowing skin for the face, or for the skin period. So for a bit, this was Nova, although it didn't last too long for some reasons. I'm not sure exactly how the powers went back to Richard Rider. I missed the last, I don't know, 12 issues of the New Warriors or something, so I missed pretty much the last storyline for with those characters. So I never really took the time to figure out how Nova got his powers back. But later on, there was a new Nova series that I read, and they never really explained what had happened at the time when Garth and Sal got the power and how Richard Rider got the powers back. And then around the time of Annihilation, we got a new redesign, a new look for our Nova character. Annihilation was a pretty awesome series. Basically, there was what was called the Annihilation Wave, which was coming towards our universe, and that was pretty much destroying everything on its path. And basically, it's a wave that was coming from the negative zone somehow. I'm not sure exactly how they were crossing from the negative zone to the positive universe, sort of the actual universe. And then, as the name implies, the Annihilation Wave was led by the evil Annihilus, and at the time they pretty much destroyed the Nova Corps. Nova was pretty much the last Nova member, and they sort of tweaked his look a bit. This is about as close as I was able to get. The shoulders aren't quite right. Some of the pieces aren't quite right, but it's actually somewhat close to what the look that the character had at the time. Like they gave him those sort of spiky yellow shoulders, which didn't really make much sense. Like he probably was stabbing himself more often than not when he was lifting an arm. But that's comics. Those kind of things happen. Again, for the helmet, we went with the Green Knight helmet. The chest piece, obviously, I went with the Stalwart Defender. The back piece is the Fourth World. The belt is the Atlantean belt, if I'm not mistaken. The hands and the boots are the Amazonian hands and boots. And the shoulders are the Tech Ninja shoulders. And again, the emblem is still the Shade emblem. It's the Shade from Shade the Changing Man. Although it kind of, for some reason, whenever I see that emblem, actually what I think of is Brainiac. I always think it's an emblem for Brainiac. But I guess it could work both ways. So again, this was redesigned during the Annihilation miniseries, and then there was a second Annihilation miniseries, like I forget what the actual name was. But the first Annihilation miniseries, if you never read it, I strongly suggest it. It was a pretty cool event. And then at some point, as too often happens, they decided to kill Richard Rider. They actually killed Richard Rider and Peter Quill, I think, at the time, and they replaced Nova with a new version of the character. His name was Sam Alexander. There was a whole backstory behind the scene reasons why they got rid of the Richard Rider and replaced him with a new character. Basically, it had to do with somewhat. It had to do with some behind the scenes reasons that didn't have really anything to do with the character, which is sad, but it happens from time to time. So basically, they were trying to pretty much introduce a new version of Nova, hoping to get a new audience for the character. The series they gave him his own series, and the series lasted for a bit. It wasn't too bad at first, but sadly I quickly lost interest in that series. And later on, they created a new Warrior series where this Nova was part of that series, which was cancelled in the blink of an eye. And last I saw this character, I think it was within the pages of the new Champions series at Marvel. Uh, but sadly, it wasn't a very good series. So this is about as close as I was able to get to the Sam Alexander Nova character. From what I understand, they were supposed to bring back the original Nova. Not sure if they did so or if it was just part of their generation initiatives, or we saw in some sort of flashback some older versions of some of the newer characters they have now. Oh well. So again, for the chest piece, I went with the Stalwart Defenders. The headpiece is still the Green Knight headpiece, just with different colors. The shoulders, the Green Arrow shoulders. The gloves are the Red Tornado gloves. The belt is also the Green Arrow belt. The boots are the Nuclear boots. And again, the pants are still the Blood Bat. Blood. No. Oh no, actually, the pants I went with the Stalwart Defender. Oh well. It happens. And the back piece, that is still the new, the Fourth World back piece. So this was pretty much as close to recreating the Centurion Nova Prime as I was able to do, and some of its incarnation throughout the years. Although technically, this was like three different versions of Nova, three different characters. Again, with the original Nova, I could have done like half a dozen, if not a dozen, different variations within the pages of the New Warriors. Somehow, every issue they had almost a new costume. Like it wasn't really a new costume, but it was the same costume, but with some subtle changes. Like either the T-shirt would be different, or the gloves would be different, or so there were quite a few strange subtle changes from issue to issue. I guess the artist at the time couldn't decide on how to reinvent the costume. So every issue he would more or less redesign the costume a bit. But eventually, around issue 12, 11, 10, I forget. Yeah, I think around issue 12 or in that area, they pretty much went back to his classic costume, which is pretty much this one. Again, this is about as close as I was able to get, which is pretty close. If you were to create this look for your character, and if you were to call it Nova or Nova Prime or the Centurion Nova Prime, people would understand easily which character you've recreated. And also, we saw the Nova Corps in the latest, actually not the latest, in the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, uh, where there's rumors that we're still going to see the Nova Corps in Avengers Infinity War. And there's rumors that we're going to see the Nova Core and maybe even the Centurion Nova Prime in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I guess we're going to have to wait and see for that. So anyway, so I thought I'd show you one of my favorite characters ever, the Centurion Nova Prime. Hope you guys liked it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask so in the comment section down below. And that's going to be it for now, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.